Actually, I'm not going to really talk to you about what's next for the church. What I'm going to talk to you about is what is next church. As Pete said, I am a child of the PCUSA. I was 10 when reunion happened. Now, there was a brief time when I was a Baptist. My father was a student at Southwestern Baptist Seminary in Fort Worth, Texas when I was born. But I think that lasted about 3 or 4 years when he realized his theological home was more with the Presbyterian tradition and not in the Southern Baptist tradition. I love this church, this Presbyterian way of being Christian. I tell every new members class and every officer training session that Presbyterianism is absolutely bred into my bones. I could not escape it if I tried, and I did try a little bit in college. I love the fact that we're suspicious of investing too much power in a few people. I love that we believe God does some of God's best speaking to us through the voice of others. So we do everything we can to spread out decision-making by doing sort of what the board has been doing all day long, gathering in a room for prayer, listening, and discernment. I love the fact that we try hard to be comfortable with ambiguity and that we're not a recipe kind of Christianity. I love the fact that we celebrate both doubt and affirmation as signs of an intense relationship with God. I love the fact that my sense of call is not just about me and Jesus, but it has to be tested and confirmed by the church. I love our book of Confessions, which illustrates how fallible human beings in very different times and places tried to get their minds around what God was doing in and with them, and therefore how they were being called to respond as church. I even love the Book of Order, though I'm particularly fond of the Directory for Worship, as it seeks to give words to the mystery of what happens in holy space and holy time. I love the fact that our Reformed theological tradition tries never to get too comfortable or staid, and we're convinced that we follow a God on the move, therefore we are to be a church on the move too. I love that we are still trying to be open to being reformed by God's creative spirit. You've all seen the t-shirt. I don't own one, although I should. I'm sinfully proud to be a Presbyterian. And yet, at the same time, I'm beginning to sense, even in my own institutional soul, a dissatisfaction with doing church business as usual. I spent lots of time in Presbytery Committee on Ministry meetings, not in this Presbytery and former ones, focused on dysfunction. The dysfunction of a session, or the dysfunction of a pastor, or the systematic dysfunction of a congregation who just cannot change and feels trapped. And I found myself very frustrated that we only have the time to spend on things that we are not doing well, that are not going well, thereby having to basically ignore the congregations and the sessions and the pastors who are engaged in fruitful, healthy, lively ministries. Why can't the church celebrate these things? I would think to myself. Presbytery, Committee on Ministry, General Assembly, they, important pronoun, need to do things differently. They are spending too much time on and money on our brokenness to the expense of our health. And that frustration was made even greater just this past summer. Now, it was at the 1992 General Assembly in Milwaukee that I first had a strong sense of confirmation into ordained ministry. So I like General Assembly. I've even been known to like the politics of General Assembly. I think it's kind of fun. And I know that some beautiful things happened for folks who were there this past summer, just as they did for me in 1992. I realize I have no idea of the fullness of that experience because all I could do was watch the live feed and follow it on social media. And yet, I must admit that I felt disheartened by the amount of time we spent on things like procedure. I've never seen so many votes on whether or not to take a vote. I was irritated that we were asking people to make conscientious and faithful decisions at 1 a.m. in the morning. And frankly, I was stunned by some of the things said on the floor of the meeting about our brothers and sisters in Christ. And as the assembly wrapped up, I found myself someone who has a love for the institution of the church deep within her soul, realizing again that something's going to have to change. But at the same time, even in my dissatisfaction, something has shifted for me. For in between my time on Committee on Ministries in Texas And watching the GA last summer, Next, has become a part of my life. And through these Next conversations, I have come to realize that they are me and you. I could not wait for the church, the presbytery, the system to make changes. I have to participate in whatever God is calling this body to become. As a teaching elder, I have a responsibility to offer whatever energy and leadership I have to discovering the ways God is inviting us to be born again as Presbyterians in the PCUSA. I can no longer wait for the church to do something about it, whatever it is. I am part of the church. You are part of the church. And frankly, making that shift has given me new life and new passion, and it's helped me to be free to be on the lookout so that now I can see with more clarity all of the powerful and the very good and healthy things that are going on in the ministry within this beloved denomination, both inside and outside the structures. Here's how the director of Next Church, Reverend Jessica Tate, puts it. When I'm following God, usually as part of the church, because how else do we do that? Hope, joy, abundance, and awe are there. But when I'm waiting on the church to change or to lead or to do whatever I think it's supposed to do, I'm often dissatisfied and disappointed. It's that same spirit out of which Next was born. Few teaching elders were sitting around a breakfast at General Assembly 6 or so years ago, lamenting the state of the church. We've all gotten very good at that, haven't we? Decline, death, less money, less people, lament, complaint. This isn't the church I signed up to be a part of, they said. We're the exciting, inspiring, community-changing mission projects like hospitals and clean water. I remember when we were starting schools, and that was what we were known for. Now we only make the news for our arguing and infighting. When was the last time our presbytery started a new church? And where's the leadership that will help us navigate this changing culture? They were waiting on the church. Fortunately, though, they had the wherewithal to change the conversation. God's not done with us. We don't think God's done with this church, they decided. The pangs we hear are not death pangs. They are birth pangs. Something new is starting to be born in and among us. So let's quit waiting for someone else to address these leadership issues. Let's stop waiting on the they. God has called us into this particular way of being Christian, so it's time to either shut up or step up. Let us start following God's Spirit and see where God is calling us. Let us learn what we can about offering healthy leadership in times of change. Let us become a community of practice with and for one another and choose to focus more purposely on the vows to be a friend among our colleagues in ministry, serving the people with intelligence, imagination, energy, and love. Thankfully, that group also had the wisdom to realize they better quickly expand that conversation to people who'd had different experiences, who are different ages and races, who serve in differing capacities. For as our Book of Order makes clear, the most helpful and faithful community of practice and discernment will be a diverse one. So they expanded the conversation. And I, as a pastor at a 350-member congregation in Irving, Texas, got a phone call from a friend, Agnes Norfleet, who invited me to a conversation in Kansas City in September of 2009. It ended up taking place in the 2 weeks between leaving that church and starting this one. We had just moved here. But luckily, I still remember what happened, so that's good. We met in Kansas City that September of 2009, and after talking about all that I've just said, the state of the church, the need for leadership, after a lot of lament and complaining, the next movement started to take shape. And we said, you know what? I wonder, maybe other people will want to be a part of this conversation. There were around 15 of us or so at that time. Maybe we should get a few of them together in, Indianapolis. Lewis, you can do that, right? Lewis Galloway said sure, as Lewis always does. So let's try to do something like that, February. So we organized a quick conference, and we hoped that 100 would show up. 300 people came. And the feedback was both positive and critical. Some of the critical feedback helped us see what voices were missing in leadership, and we worked quickly to remedy that. Now, after that experience, we thought, okay, well, maybe this has some legs. We should probably get a mission statement to help us focus. We're Presbyterians, after all. And then we said we probably need to get a little bit more organized in the way we go about things. So we set up a strategy team and an advisory team. Now, at a meeting in New York at Fifth Avenue, we asked a group of folks to take a first stab at a mission statement. And after much refinement via email and other conversations, this is where we landed. Here's our mission statement. The mission of Next Church is to foster relationships among God's people, sparking imaginations, connecting congregations, offering a distinctively Presbyterian witness to Jesus Christ. Next believes that healthy, talented, creative, connected leadership doesn't wait on the institution of the church, but follows God boldly in the world. So here's our vision. Trusting in God's sovereignty and grace, Next Church will engage the church that is becoming by cultivating vital connections, celebrating emerging leadership and innovation, and working with congregations and leaders to form and reform faith communities. That's it. So then we decided, all right, well, let's have another national conversation in Dallas and see what happens. We'll invite people who are doing innovative, healthy ministry in the denomination, have them give us their testimonies, their stories, so we can draw ideas from each other, so that we can get energy from each other. And let's make sure we have good preaching and thick liturgy, so that all we do is centered on and grounded on our worship of God, the reason we're here in the first place, the very reason for our being. And let's have a good keynote address, some meat to chew on from a theologian who will challenge us and push us and get our brain cells firing. And let's have a whole lot of workshops where people can share ideas and develop relationships and partnerships that might not otherwise exist. So with God's help and financial support from Village Presbyterian, Second in Indy, and First Dallas, we did that. And we didn't know how many to expect. This was just last February. 600 showed up, with a whole lot more who participated online. And at that national conversation, we decided, okay, we need to do this beyond this one-time-a-year thing. There need to be regional conversations happening in different parts of the country so that local relationships can really take root and those partnerships can strengthen. Because one thing we are getting clear about is that we are no longer connectional by institution only. Just because we're in the same presbytery doesn't mean we share life together, or share ministry together, or even share friendship together anymore. We're having to redefine our connectionalism from one by institution to one as relationships that we create with one another. We have to take responsibility for our connectionalism in a way that we've not had to do before, or at least in a way we've not had to do for a long time. I remember hearing about times in Grace Presbyterian Dallas where pastors would argue vehemently on the floor with each other, and then they'd go to the end of the day to share dinner. That doesn't just happen anymore. But rather than bemoaning it, it's time to take responsibility for it. So we knew that having regional gatherings would be very important to keep this movement alive. And in the past year, 8 have popped up. We've seeded some of them. But in other places, Jessica's gotten a phone call from a pastor who said, hey, I want to organize a regional conversation about Next and get people together to dream and imagine and play. Can you help me do that? So we do, and so they happen. In addition to these gatherings, we also know that if the energy is to continue, we have to have an excellent website full of resources that can be uploaded and shared, blogs, and other ways to foster partnerships. And that is now happening. Our new website's about to go live. And we're starting to see some fruit. There are new mission initiatives being put together by congregations because of the ideas and enthusiasm that have bubbled up at the national and regional gatherings. Some examples: new clergy groups are being formed. People are sharing resources like officer training and liturgy. There are urban ministry connections being made. Campus ministry proposal in 5 pilot sites is being written. And Jessica, our director, is hearing responses like these. One new pastor in her 2nd year of ministry: I feel like I'm not drowning out here alone anymore. One pastor who's been in ministry for 30 years. This movement is being like a resurrection experience for me. For the first time, I feel we might leave a more faithful church for my kids than the ones I've served. Pastor called the other day and said he feels like the energy of the next movement is Joseph in Egypt during the famine, a source of wisdom and hope for him. And we've watched elders and other church leaders attending regional gatherings who leave inspired and connected and bolstered by the community. More than one of them has said it feels like there's a revival when I'm here. And it's exciting and it's fulfilling and it is scary as heck because we don't know what's exactly going on with this next church movement. We didn't know what we were doing. We still really don't. And I'm a very planned out, my church members will tell you, I'm a very planned out, not a spontaneous person. And I decided God's basically saying to me, lighten up for goodness sake. Be more playful, go with it, enjoy it. Do your best and invest yourself, but you can't manage it, so stop trying. So I'm living into that bit by bit. Now, lest you think all is rosy in the land of Next, let me share some interesting feedback we've been receiving. We're beginning to get phone calls or hear murmuring that sounds something like this. I don't know if I can be for you or against you if you won't define yourself in a particular way, i.e. doctrinally. People are asking us, what does Next believe about sexuality and ordination? What about Christology? How does Next define the authority of Scripture, etc.? The fact that we are not centered around a particular doctrinal response to these questions, the fact that we have not been set up to be an advocacy for a particular issue or particular constitutional amendment seems to be raising some anxiety on both ends of the theological spectrum. But here's our conviction. We are not disengaged from these doctrinal issues. We don't think they're unimportant or that we just moved on. Rather, we are committed to having these important kinds of theological discussions within the structures of our denominations, at session meetings, at presbytery meetings, at committee meetings, at General Assembly meetings, which is where those kinds of things should be taking place. We have doctrine. You can find it in our Book of Confessions. But we're not an affinity group or an advocacy group unless you count the PCUSA. None of that is what we are about. So there are folks who don't quite know what to do with us because of that. The next movement is about innovation. How are folks doing ministry in new or engaging ways? It's about offering a platform for new relationships and connections between ministries. It is not about providing a program for how to make those things happen. We're not going to provide those resources or give you something like Alban or some of these other things that go really well. It says, here, you do this. No, we're going to provide space for you to come and talk with each other and discover together what might be happening. Next is about identifying, supporting, and encouraging healthy leadership within the church. And next is about being a space in which we can rediscover our relational and connectional core. Tom R., pastor of Village Pres in Kansas City, serves with me as the co-chair of this strategy team. And as Tom and I said in Dallas, our denomination, we feel, has been primarily focused around one ordination question these past few decades. My whole life, adult life, basically. Peace, unity, and purity. But we find ourselves drawn to the ordination question about being the friend with our colleagues and serving the people with everything that we have. And I'm here to tell you that shift has some holy energy behind it. So what's next? We don't know. I hope you didn't expect that you would hear exactly what was next from me tonight. But we do know we're not waiting for the church on the church. Why? Because we are the church. All of us together, we're waiting for ourselves, right? And that means it's time to step up and to lead and to be open to the church that's being made new. For in Jesus Christ we have good hope. God is not nearly done with us yet. And that's what we believe. And that's what we're about. So I invite all of you on March 4th and 5th to come to Charlotte. where we'll be having our next national conversation. The conversation will take place primarily at First Presbyterian Church there, with an evening, Monday evening, will be over at Myers Park. Our preachers for that event are Jessica Tate, Amos Diasasa from Columbia, South Carolina, Teresa Cho from San Francisco, Steve Eason from Myers Park. Our keynoter is Dr. Paul Roberts, president of Johnson C. Smith Seminary in Atlanta. Testimonies are going to be things like a church, a smaller church up in Washington, D.C. that is being redeveloped, and it's becoming this very energized congregation. And you know the primary thing they're doing? They're doing really good worship. Imagine that, redevelopment through liturgy and worship. So she's going to tell us their story. We're also going to hear a story about the way that Broad Street Presbyterian Church in Philly set up an administrative commission and had someone through the Presbyterian, had someone on there as they worked to redevelop another urban ministry site in Philly that's going. And on that administrative commission, there was another young woman who's now setting up another redevelopment of an urban ministry site, still in the same place. So that's going on, and that has great possibilities for us to hear and to learn about. Those are the kinds of things that we do. We talk about what's going well. We talk about where there's new life breaking out, and then I might meet you, and our congregations might want to share some ministry and mission together. That's what we're about. Christopher Edmonston, who is here, pastor at White Memorial, is a new member of the strategy team. He's also a new member of the Montreat board, and we're glad that he's joining us in this work. So y'all, we're just figuring it out together, but that's the deal. We're no longer waiting anymore. And that's what Next Church is about. And I hope if you're at all interested, you'll contact me, or you'll join us, or you'll find us on the web, or show up in Charlotte. Because things are happening. We had no idea what was being started. And it's terrifying and exhilarating all at the same time. Thanks be to God for the gift of being a church that is on the move. Amen.